Marcus Cole wiped the grease from his hands and stared at the broken reactor coil like it had personally insulted him. Thing was older than most planets in this sector and held together by spite and cheap welding, but that was how everything worked on Cavro 7. This moon was where ships came to die and where people came when they had nowhere else to go. He fell into both categories. 3 years ago, the Earth colonial fleet had kicked him out for what they called unauthorized modifications to critical systems. What they meant was he made their ships run better than the original designs, and the brass hated that. So here he was on a junkyard moon fixing smuggler ships for credits and trying not to think about home. The workshop was small and cramped, but it was his outside. The reinforced windows, the landscape looked like a graveyard made of metal broken. Halls stretched for kilometers in every direction. Some were torn apart for parts, and others sat waiting for someone desperate enough to buy them tonight. The twin moons cast everything in a sick purple light. Marcus was about to call it quits when the sky lit up. A ship was coming in fast, and it was not slowing down. He ran to the window and watched the fighter spiral out of control. Whoever was piloting had lost main thrusters and possibly consciousness. The ship hit the ground about 200 meters from his workshop. Debris exploded outward in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Marcus grabbed his emergency kit and ran. He should have stayed inside. Getting involved in other people's problems on Cavro 7 was a great way to end up dead, but he was an engineer, and he could not watch something crash without wanting to fix. If the wreckage was bad, the fighter had carved a trench through the scrap piles and come to rest against a collapsed freighter. Hull fire suppressant foam was already deploying from the emergency systems. Marcus climbed over twisted metal and pulled at the cockpit. Release it was jammed. He pulled harder, and something gave with a screech of protesting alloys. The canopy lifted and smoke poured out. Inside was a person, an alien person. She was tall, even slumped in the pilot's seat. Her skin was silver, like polished metal, and covered with markings that glowed faintly blue. The armor she wore was scorched and cracked. Blood that looked too purple to be human seeped from a gash on her shoulder. Marcus checked for a pulse and found something that felt close enough. Okay, lady, whoever you are, we need to get you out of here. He unstrapped her and nearly fell over when he tried to lift her. She was heavy, dense bones or extra muscle, or maybe both. With a lot of effort and some creative use of a cargo net, he managed to drag her back to his workshop. Getting her inside was another challenge. His medical supplies were designed for humans, but biology was biology. He cleaned the wound and sealed it with synthetic skin. Her breathing steadied. The fever patch said her temperature was high, but he had no idea what normal was for her species. While she slept, he went back to examine the fighter. It was high-grade military tech, way too nice for a smuggler or pirate. The hull was made from materials he had only seen in textbooks that someone had shot the hell out of. It burn marks from energy weapons covered every surface. This was not a random attack. Someone wanted this pilot dead. Marcus spent the next hour pulling anything useful from the wreck. The power core was intact, which was lucky. The navigation system was fried, which was noth. Hauled everything back to the workshop and started sorting by the time dawn broke over Cavro 7. He had a plan. The fighter could fly again. It would take work and parts he did not have, and some creative engineering that would make his old commanders cry. But he could do. I returned to check on his unexpected guest. She was awake, and she was pointing a weapon at his face. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Marcus raised his hands. I pulled you from a burning ship, remember? The woman studied him with eyes that had no white in them, just solid gold irises that seemed to glow in the dim light. Her hand did not waver. You are human. It was not a question. Her voice was deep and carried an accent he could not place. Yeah, and you are very awake. And very armed in my workshop. He kept his tone light. How about you lower that, and we talk like civilized people? She considered this for exactly 3 seconds, then lowered the weapon. Why did you help me? Because you crashed outside my door, and I'm not in the habit of leaving people to die. Marcus moved slowly to a workbench. I fixed up your shoulder too. You are an engineer. What gave it away? He gestured at the tools and parts covering every surface. The aesthetic or the smell of burned circuitry? Something that might have been amusement crossed her face. My ship is a mess but fixable. Marcus pulled up a diagnostic display. Your power core is good, but everything else is shot. The weapons are salvageable, and I can reroute the control systems through backup channels. Give me 3 days, and you will fly again. She stood and moved to the window. Even injured, she carried herself like someone used to giving orders. I do not have 3 days. Well, unless you want to walk across the galaxy, that is what you have got. Marcus crossed his arms. Who did you make angry anyway? That is not your concern. It became my concern when you crashed next to my home. He met her gold eyes without flinching. I am risking my neck fixing your ship. The least you can do is tell me your name. She was quiet for a long moment. Valeth? Just Valeth? For now, yes. Okay, Valeth. Marcus turned back to his screens. I'm Marcus, and this is my workshop. There are ration bars in the blue container and water in the dispenser. Try not to bleed on anything expensive. He threw himself into the work. The fighter was a beautiful piece of engineering. Even half-destroyed, Wolver built it understood efficiency and power, but they had also made it delicate. One good hit in the wrong spot and critical systems failed. Marcus did not build delicate. He pulled parts from 6 different ships and started modifying. When Valeth asked what he was doing, he explained in simple terms. Your ship is like a fancy racing hover bike, fast and powerful, but one crash and it falls apart. I am making it more like a tank. Slower maybe, but it will take a beating. She watched him work with an intensity that was unnerving every time he jury-rigged a solution or bypassed a safety system. Her expression shifted, something between horror and fascination. On the second day, the alarms went off. Marcus checked his sensors, and his stomach dropped. We have got company. 3 ships were entering orbit, small and fast. Hunter class if he was reading the signatures right. Valeth moved to the window, and her whole body went rigid. The obsidian hand. Should I know what that means? It means we leave now. Her voice was steel. Your ship cannot fly yet. Marcus was already moving. We have maybe 20 minutes before they get here. Then you will make it fly in 19. She began pulling on her damaged armor. Unless you want to meet the finest assassins in the galaxy. Marcus Cole had been in tight spots before. He had fixed ships under fire and jury-rigged life support with minutes of air left, but this was different. This was insane. He grabbed his tools and ran for the fighter. I hope you are a really good pilot, Valeth, because this is going to be rough. The fighter lifted off with all the grace of a drunk elephant. Marcus had bypassed half the safety systems and rerouted power through lines that were never meant to carry that much energy, but it flew. That was what mattered. Valeth sat in the pilot seat with her hands dancing across controls that responded sluggishly. This handles like a cargo barge. This handles like a cargo barge that is not exploding. Marcus was wedged into the tiny space behind her seat, surrounded by tools and spare parts. Big difference. The first missile warning came 30 seconds after they cleared atmosphere of Valeth. Banked hard, and Marcus slammed into the wall. A little warning next time. Hold on. That was all the warning he got before she dove back toward the planet. Surface, the fighter screamed through the upper atmosphere with 3 hunter ships in pursuit. Energy bolts lit up the sky around them. Your shields are at 40%. Marcus watched his jury-rigged display flicker. Maybe try not getting hit? Helpful. Valeth's voice was dry, but her piloting was anything. But she wove between debris fields and used the planet's gravity well to slingshot around terrain. Hunter ships matched every move. Marcus started pulling panels off the interior walls. What are you doing? Back there? making us harder to kill. He yanked out the luxury environmental controls and ripped through the wiring. Your ship has way too many fancy systems. Those regulate cabin pressure. Yeah, and they also drain power. Marcus bypass 3. More non-essential systems. We need speed more than comfort. The fighter suddenly surged forward. Velith looked at her readouts in surprise. What did you just do? Gave you 10% more thrust. Marcus was already working on the next modification. Hold. Steady for 30 seconds. I cannot hold steady for 3 seconds with assassins shooting at us. Then hold unsteady but do not crash. He pulled the weapon capacitor and rewired it directly into the shield generator. It was dangerous and violated about 40 safety protocols, but the shield strength jumped to 70%. Another missile detonated close enough to rattle his teeth. Marcus, we cannot outrun them. I know. He crawled forward to see the tactical display, but we can outthink them. Explain quickly. See that asteroid cluster of bearing 273? Marcus pointed. The one that looks like certain death? Velith glanced at it. Yes, that one. Head straight for it. That is suicide. No suicide is staying out here where they can shoot us. Marcus was already calculating trajectories. Trust me. Velith made a sound that might have been a prayer in her language. Then she aimed for the asteroid cluster. The hunter ships followed. On my mark, cut all power except life support. Marcus. Watch the distance shrink. Are you insane? Probably. The asteroids loom closer. Marcus, wait for it. Marcus, now. Velith cut the power. The fighter went dark, and its momentum carried it into the cluster. They coasted in silence while the hunter ships roared past her. Their sensors were tracking engine signatures and hit a cold dead ship tumbling through asteroids. Looked like debris. Marcus held his breath and counted. 30 seconds past a minute. When do we restart? Velith's voice was barely a whisper. When they are far enough away that we can run. Marcus was watching a handheld scanner he had rigged to the hull sensors. Or when they figure out we are here. Whichever comes first. 2 minutes of agonizing silence. Then the scanner showed the hunter ships circling back. They had realized their mistake. Okay, that is our cue. Marcus grabbed onto something bolted down. Power up and go the opposite direction as fast as this thing will move. The fighter roared to life. Velith did not hesitate. She gunned the engines and shot through a gap between 2 asteroids that looked way too small. Marcus heard metal scrape against rock. Then they were clear and accelerating. They are pursuing again. Yeah, but now we have a head start. Marcus pulled up. Navigation chart. There's a smuggler station 3 hours from here. If we can reach it before they catch us, we might survive. Might? I am an engineer, not a miracle worker. The chase stretched across the system. Velith flew like someone who had been born in a cockpit. She used every trick Marcus had ever seen, and several he had not. The hunter ships were relentless. Every time they gained distance, the assassins found a way to close the gap. Marcus spent the hours doing what he did best. He rerouted. Power bypass limiters made the fighter do things it was never designed to do. One point, he literally used duct tape to hold a critical connection together. Is that adhesive bonding strip? Velith had glanced back at exactly the wrong moment. Is that a problem? On a primary fuel line? It is industrial grade. Marcus patted his work fondly. This will hold. Human engineering is terrifying. Human engineering keeps us alive. He grinned despite the situation. Your people build things pretty, but we build things that work. They reached the smuggler station with the hunter ships 5 minutes behind. Station was called Rusty Haven, and it lived up to its name, a collection of modules bolted together around the spinning core Velith brought them in fast. The docking clamps caught the fighter and pulled it into a bay. We cannot stay here long. She was already unstrapping. They will come for me. Then we keep moving. Marcus grabbed his tool bag. But first, we need fuel and supplies. I have no currency that will work here. Lucky for you, I do. He led her into the station. Rusty Haven was crowded with every type of being Marcus had ever seen, and a few he had not: smugglers and traders, and people who asked no questions, perfect for disappearing Marcus. Traded some salvaged parts for fuel and rations. Valeth stayed close and kept her face hidden on the way back to the fighter. Marcus noticed her staring at a news broadcast. Her whole body had gone still. What is it? She did not answer. He looked at the screen. It was in a dozen languages. He did not speak, but the images were clear. A woman who looked exactly like Valeth. Beside her were words that his translator patch rendered as wanted, high reward, treason, but it was the symbol that made his blood run cold. The imperial crest of the Ascendancy, government that ruled 40,000 worlds. Okay, so who exactly are you running from? Marcus kept his voice low. Valeth turned to face him. Her golden eyes were resigned. I suppose you deserve the truth. She gestured to a private alcove away from the crowds. They sat, and she spoke. My name is Valeth Sarthan. I am the High Empress of the Ascendancy. Marcus stared at her. Then he laughed. It was not a happy laugh. You are kidding. I do not make jokes about my identity. I made the most powerful person in the galaxy eat protein bars and sleep on a cargo net. Marcus put his head in his hands, and I told her not to bleed on anything expensive. You did not know. That does not make this better. He looked up. Why is the Empress running from her own empire? Because my High Council decided they would prefer a more controllable ruler. Valeth's voice was bitter. They orchestrated a coup during a diplomatic summit. Most of my loyal guards died, getting me to that fire. I am sorry. Marcus meant it. But why run? Why not fight back? With what? She gestured at herself. I am one person with a damaged ship. My enemies control the military and the treasury and the government. They have already declared me a traitor. Anyone who helps me will be executed. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood. Well then, it is a good thing I am a nobody from a nobody species. He offered his hand. Come on, Your Majesty. We have a ship to fix properly. Why? Would you help me? Valeth looked genuinely confused. You gain nothing from this. Maybe I am just too stupid to know when to quit. Marcus smiled. It is kind of a human thing. Something changed in her expression, like she was seeing him for the first time. Your people have a reputation. Stubborn and reckless and utterly impossible to predict. Sounds about right. He was already walking back to the docks. Now come on before those assassins show up. We have an empire to save. The forest moon of Kelrith 9 was dying. Its trees were gray and brittle, and the air tasted like ash, but it had one thing going for it. Nobody came here anymore. That made it perfect for hiding. Marcus and Valeth had been here for 3 days. 3 days of working on the fighter and dodging long-range scans and living on rations that tasted like cardboard. The rebel outpost was little more than a bunker buried under dead roots. Inside were 6 of Valeth's loyalists who had survived the coup. They treated Marcus with suspicion. He was human after all, and humans had a reputation. The modifications you made to the Empress's ship are crude. Commander Zethus was a tall being with 4 arms and an attitude problem. They violate every engineering standard. Yeah, but they work. Marcus did not look up from the power converter he was rewiring. Your fancy standards do not mean much when you are dead. Zethus made a sound of disgust and walked away. Valeth appeared at Marcus's shoulder. You will have to forgive the commander. He believes in doing things properly. There is nothing proper about any of this. Marcus gestured around the cramped bunker. We are hiding in a dead forest because your government wants you dead. Proper went out the window a long time ago. She sat on a supply crate and watched him work over. The past days something had shifted between them. The wall she kept up had started coming down. Tell me about Earth. What do you want to know? Anything. Valeth's voice was curious. I have read the reports, but they are all military assessments. They say your people are dangerous. We can be. Marcus tested a connection and nodded when it held. Earth is not part of the ascendancy. We have our own colonies, and we like keeping it that way. Yes, I am aware. She smiled slightly. The ascendancy tried to bring Earth into the Empire 3 separate times, and 3 times you failed. Marcus allowed himself a small grin. We are stubborn like that. The reports called it insanity. Valith leaned forward. Your people fight with a ferocity that terrifies military strategists. Scorched earth tactics and guerrilla warfare, and a refusal to ever surrender. One admiral wrote that humans would rather die than be conquered. Is that true? Pretty much. Marcus set down his tools. Freedom matters to us. Maybe more than it should. But we have seen what happens when you let others control your fate. He met her golden eyes. So yeah, we fight. And we do not fight fair. Valith was quiet for a long moment. I envy that your people choose their own path. Mine was chosen for me the day I was born. Is that why you ran? Marcus kept his voice gentle. Because you never wanted the throne? I took the throne because someone had to. Just stood and walked to the small window. The previous emperor was my uncle. He was a tyrant who crushed worlds and enslaved populations. When he died, there was a power vacuum. The council wanted to install a puppet. I challenged them because I believed the empire could be better. But the empire is so large, Marcus. Her voice was tired. 40,000 worlds, trillions of beings. I spent 15 years trying to reform systems that have existed for millennia, and for every small victory, there were a dozen setbacks. The council fought me at every turn. The corporations wanted more power. The military wanted more wars. I was drowning in it. She turned to face him. When they tried to kill me, part of me was relieved. I could finally be free of it. Marcus stood and crossed to her. But you are still here. Still fighting. Why? Because of you. The words hung in the air. Marcus was genuinely confused. I am just an engineer. You are more than that. Vila's voice was intense. You are someone who sees a crashed ship and runs toward it instead of away. Someone who fixes impossible things with adhesive strips and stubbornness. You fight because it is right, not because someone ordered you to. She gestured to the bunker. These people are loyal to the crown, but you are loyal to something else. To the idea that people deserve better. I had forgotten what that looked like. Marcus did not know what to say to that, so he said what came naturally. Okay, but if we are doing this, we do it right. You want your empire back? Then we need a plan. They gathered the loyalists around a hollow table. Marcus pulled up a tactical display of the Ascendancy capital world, Throne of Sareth. Valith pointed to the massive planet. The entire surface is one continuous palace. It is protected by orbital defense platforms and a fleet of 20,000 ships. No army could take it. Good thing we are not an army. Marcus zoomed in on the palace structure. We are 8 people with 1 beat-up fighter and a lot of attitude. That is insane. Commander Zethus stared at him. You cannot assault the capital with 8 people. You are right, Marcus grinned. We do not assault it. We sneak in. He pulled up shipping schedules and security protocols. Your usurper friend is going to have a coronation ceremony, right? In 6 days, yes. Valith was watching him carefully. All eyes will be on the throne room. Security will be at maximum, which means it will also be changing shift patterns. Marcus highlighted several sections. New guards learning new routes. Temporary clearances for ceremony staff. Supply ships bringing in food and decorations. Controlled chaos. You want to infiltrate during the coronation? One of the loyalists leaned forward. That is the most secure the palace will ever be. It is also the most distracted. Marcus pulled up more data. Look at these security logs from past ceremonies. When everyone is focused on the throne room, the outer sections get less attention. And here is the thing about fancy security systems. He zoomed in on power distribution. They all run on the same core infrastructure, which means they all have the same vulnerabilities. What vulnerabilities? Velith's eyes were sharp. The ones humans would exploit. Marcus started drawing paths through the palace. Your people build elegant systems. Everything integrated and efficient. But that means when one thing breaks, everything breaks. Human systems are uglier. We build redundancy on top of redundancy. Because we assume things will fail. He looked around the table. Your security expects attacks from the outside. Military assaults and cyber intrusions. They are not ready for someone who goes low-tech, who cuts power lines and jams signals and uses the palace's own systems against it. Commander Zethus was shaking his head. Even if we reach the throne room, the usurper has an army. Then, we do not fight the army. Marcus pulled up architectural plans. We turn off their toys, environmental controls, and gravity plating and automated defenses, all run through central nodes. We hit those nodes, the whole palace goes dark. And in the dark? Velith was smiling now. In the dark, I take back my throne. They spent the next 3 days planning every detail. Marcus taught them human tactics, how to improvise and adapt, how to make weapons from common items, how to fight dirty. The loyalists were horrified at first, but slowly they began to understand. There was a kind of genius in human chaosing method too. The madness. On the 5th day, Velith found Marcus working alone. Can I ask you something? Sure. He was elbow deep in a maintenance panel. Why are you doing this? She sat beside him. You could have left me to die on Cavral 7. You could have walked away when you learned who I was. Instead, you are planning to assault the most fortified location in the galaxy. For what? For a throne that is not yours and an empire that has only ever seen your people as primitives. Marcus was quiet while he finished the repair. Then he sat back and looked at her. When the Ascendancy tried to take Earth the first time, I was just a kid. But I remember watching the news with my dad. I remember him saying that some things are worth fighting for. That freedom and dignity are not things you compromise on. He met her golden eyes. You asked me to help you take back the throne. But you also promised that when you did, humanity would get a real seat at the table. That matters. But honestly, Marcus smiled. I am doing this because you deserve better. The galaxy deserves better. And maybe because I am just dumb enough to think we can actually pull this off. Velith reached out and took his hand. It was the first time she had initiated contact. Thank you, Marcus Cole. When this is over, I will make sure your people are never dismissed again. I will hold you to that. Your Majesty. He squeezed her hand once, then stood. Now come on. We have an empire to steal back. The garbage scow smelled exactly like you would expect. Marcus tried not to breathe through his nose as they floated through Throne of Sarath's orbital checkpoint. Clearance codes accepted. The automated system did not even scan their cargo. Proceed to lower dock 7-3 Alpha. And people say human security is bad. Marcus was wedged between bags of recycled organics. Your empire trusts a garbage ship more than a military transport. No one suspects trash. Velith was pressed against the hull beside him. It is beneath notice, which makes it perfect. The other 6 loyalists were scattered throughout the cargo. All of them wore the uniforms of waste management workers. All of them carried weapons hidden in cleaning equipment. The scow landed without incident. They unloaded their cargo into the palace processing center and split into 3 teams. Marcus went with Velith and Commander Zethus. Their target was the central power distribution hub, 3 levels below the ceremony. All getting there required walking through the busiest sections of the palace. Marcus kept his head down and his tool bag close around them. The palace was in organized chaos. Staff rushed everywhere preparing for the coronation. Decorations were being hung. Security was being briefed. No one looked twice at the maintenance crew. They reached a service elevator and descended. The hub was exactly where the blueprint said it would be. Massive room filled with conduits and control systems. 2 guards stood Watch Marcus set down his bag and pulled out what looked like a maintenance scanner. "Excuse me." He approached the guards with his best confused expression. "We got a report of a fluctuation in this sector. Got to run diagnostics." The guards looked at each other. One checked the datapad. "There is no scheduled maintenance." "Yeah, well, there is no scheduled power failure either," Marcus shrugged. "But if you want to explain to the High Council why the lights went out during the coronation, that is on you." The guard hesitated. That moment of uncertainty was all Valeth needed. She moved faster than Marcus could track. One guard went down silently. Other managed half a shot before Zethus's forearms caught him. They dragged the unconscious guards into a storage closet. That was close. Marcus was already moving to the main console. "How long do we have?" 20 minutes until the ceremony begins." Valeth stood watch at the door. "After that, security will be locked down." Marcus's fingers flew across the interface. The Ascendancy used standardized systems across all their facilities that made them efficient. It also made them predictable. He found the master controls and started making changes. "What are you doing?" Zethus watched over his shoulder. "Creating a back door." Marcus was typing faster now. "When the ceremony starts, I can trigger a cascade failure from any terminal in the palace. Environmental controls will shut down first, then lighting, then gravity, then automated defenses. It will look like a system malfunction, but it will be me." "How long will we have?" 15 minutes before their engineers figure out what happened and restore control. Marcus backed away from the console. 15 minutes to get you to the throne room and deal with the usurper. They moved through the palace corridors with practiced efficiency. Ceremony was beginning. They could hear it echoing through the hall. Speeches about a new era, about strong leadership, about the Empire's glorious future. Marcus felt sick listening to it. They reached an observation balcony overlooking the throne room below them. Thousands of nobles and officials filled the vast chamber. At the center stood a figure in ceremonial robes. The usurper, General Kavrosh, had been Veleth's chief military advisor. Now he stood ready to take her crown. "I trusted him." Veleth's voice was barely a whisper. "He was one of my closest friends." "I know." Marcus put a hand on her shoulder. "But he made his choice. Now you make yours." She nodded once. Face became a mask of determination. Marcus pulled out a compact terminal and connected it to the palace network. "On your signal." Valeth raised her hand. Below, Kavros was accepting the crown from the High Council. The moment it touched his head, Valeth dropped her hand. Marcus triggered the cascade. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then, every light in the throne room went out. Shouting erupted in the darkness. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in red. Then that went out too. The gravity plating failed. Next, people began floating weightless in the massive chamber. Panic spread like wildfire. Now, Valeth launched herself from the balcony. She used the zero gravity to cross the throne room in seconds. Marcus and the others followed. It was Chaos Guards were trying to establish order, but could not tell up from down. Nobles were screaming and grabbing at anything bolted down. And in the center, Kavros was shouting orders that no one could harm. Valeth landed beside him, even in the dim emergency lights. Her presence was unmistakable. "Hello, old friend." Her voice cut through the noise. Kavros spun. His face went from shock to rage in an instant. "You should be dead." "I have heard that a lot lately." Valeth drew her weapon. "Yet here I am." Kavros grabbed for his own sidearm. Marcus was faster. The welding torch he had modified into a weapon sent a bright arc of electricity across the space. Kavros dodged, but it bought Valeth the second she needed. She closed the distance, and they collided in midair. The fight was brutal. Kavros was a trained warrior, but Valeth fought like someone who had nothing left to lose. Marcus tried to help, but keeping them alive was a full-time job. Guards were regaining their composure. He pulled out the devices they had prepared, homemade MP grenades built from scavenged parts. Threw one and watched with satisfaction as a squad's weapons died. Commander Zethus and the other loyalists Engaged anyone who got close. It was 8 against hundreds. The smart money was not on, but they were not betting smart money. They were betting on human stubbornness and loyal friends, and on an Empress who refused to quit. Valith slammed Kavros into a pillar in the low gravity. The impact was not as devastating as it should have been, but it was enough. She pressed her weapon to his chest. Yield. Never. Kavros's smile was ugly. Even if you kill me, the council will never accept you back. They will crown another puppet, and another after that. You have already lost, maybe. Velith's voice was cold, but you will not be alive to see it. WAIT. Marcus was at a terminal, hacking into the palace communication system. Do not kill him yet. We need him. He got the system online and broadcast to every screen in the palace and to every world in the Empire. The camera drones that had been filming the coronation were now filming Valith, people of the Ascendancy. Her voice rang out across 40,000 worlds. I am High Empress Valith Sarthan, your true Empress. I stand before you in the throne room with the traitor who tried to steal your crown, with the council that tried to murder me, with the corrupt officials who would see the Empire burn for their own profit. She pulled Kavros to his feet, made him face the cameras. This is the face of your new leadership, a general who betrayed his oath, a council that serves only themselves. They told you I was a traitor. They lied. Velith's golden eyes blazed. I am your Empress, and I have returned. Not with an army, but with 8 loyal friends and 1 very stubborn human engineer. We took back this throne room with nothing but determination and a refusal to surrender. If we can do that, imagine what we can do together. The throne room had gone quiet. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Then someone started clapping, a noble floating near the back wall, then another and another. Within moments, the applause was deafening. Not everyone was clapping. Some of the council members looked murderous. Some guards still had weapons ready, but enough people were cheering that it mattered. Marcus let out a breath. He did not know he was holding. Speech worked. It is not over yet. Commander Zethus pointed to the main entrance. The palace garrison will respond in force. How long until they get here? 5 minutes, maybe less. Valith looked at Marcus. Can you restore gravity and power? Yeah, but if I do that, the palace defenses come back online, including the automated weapons. Do it anyway. She was already moving to the throne. I will deal with the garrison. Marcus did not argue. He triggered the restart sequence. The lights came back on gravity, returned, and everyone crashed to the floor with varying degrees of grace. The automated defense systems came online. Immediately targeted the largest armed group in the throne room, which happened to be Kavros' personal guard. They scattered as weapons fire erupted from the walls. Stand down. Velith's voice boomed through the chamber. By order of the High Empress, all automated systems will target anyone who raises a weapon against the throne. She sat down right there in the throne that had been hers. The coup is over. Any who wish to continue this rebellion step forward now. No one moved. The garrison arrived to find their Empress on her throne, the usurper in chains, and the High Council. Looking very nervous, Kavros struggled against his restraints. This is not finished. His eyes were wild. You think you have won, but you do not understand. The council has insurance. He laughed a horrible sound. If I do not transmit the proper codes within the hour, the orbital platforms will fire. They will glass the capital, kill millions of your precious citizens, unless you surrender the throne and leave quietly. The throne room went silent. Marcus felt his blood run cold. You would kill millions of your own people? Velith's voice shook. For power? For stability, Kavros grinned. Better millions die than the Empire fall into chaos. The platforms cannot be stopped. The codes are locked behind systems. Even your pet human cannot crack. He looked directly at Marcus. You have 45 minutes. Choose wisely, Your Majesty. Marcus was already running The orbital defense control station hung above Throne of Sereth like a metal moon. Marcus reached it with 37 minutes to spare. He had commandeered the fastest shuttle he could find and pushed it past every safety limit. Now he was looking at the most secure system in the Ascendancy, and it was laughing at him. Access denied. The main terminal flashed red. This system requires Alpha-level clearance and biometric confirmation from 3 council members. Marcus pulled out his tools and got to work. He did not have Alpha clearance. He did not have council biometrics. What he had was a very bad attitude and a refusal to accept impossible. The control station was automated only. A skeleton crew of technicians maintained it. Marcus had locked them in a storage bay. It was not nice, but he did not have time for nice. The main computer core was buried behind 17 layers of security. Each layer required different codes, different protocols, different verification methods. It would take a team of experts days to crack. Marcus had 29 minutes, so he did what humans do best. He cheated. The system was designed to be unhackable from the inside, but it still needed power. It still needed cooling. It still had physical connections to the outside world. Marcus pulled a maintenance panel off the wall and started ripping out cables. Warning, the computer announced calmly. Primary data connections have been severed. This will result in system instability. Good. Marcus pulled more cables. That is the point. He bypassed the main computer entirely and went straight for the hardware. The actual firing mechanism for the orbital platforms was mechanical. It had to be software, could be hacked, but mechanical triggers required physical presence. That meant somewhere in this station was a physical switch, or rather dozens of switches, one for each platform. Marcus ran through the corridors following power conduits. His scanner showed him energy flow. High concentrations meant important systems. He found the firing control room behind a blast door. It was locked with the same ridiculous security. Marcus pulled out his last EMP grenade. This is either really smart or really stupid. He set the charge against the door controls and ran. The explosion fried every electronic system in a 10-meter radius, including the lock. The door slid open. Inside was a nightmare rows of mechanical switches, each one connected to targeting computers and power relays, each one labeled with coordinates. Marcus did not have time to figure out which ones controlled the capital, so he started pulling them all. The switches were built to resist tampering. They were hardened against electromagnetic pulses and physical shock. They were designed by the best engineers in the galaxy. Marcus broke them with a wrench and pure spite, but pulling the switches was not enough. The targeting computers were still active. They could override mechanical safeties. He needed to shut down the computers themselves, except they were distributed across the station. Redundant systems protecting redundant systems, and he had 11 minutes. Marcus ran to the power distribution center, the same concept as the palace hub, but on a much larger scale. Massive capacitors fed energy to every system on the station, including the computers, including the targeting systems, including life support. Marcus looked at the controls and made a decision he really hoped he would not regret. He started shutting down everything life support, gravity, environmental controls. Every non-essential system went dark. The station groaned around him. Emergency lighting kicked in, alarms screamed warnings, and the targeting computers kept running, because of course they did. They had their own dedicated power supply, redundant and isolated. Marcus found the power conduits feeding the computers. They ran through the walls behind layers of armor plating. He could not cut them, could not redirect them, could not access them at all. 7 minutes. Marcus sat down and forced himself to think. The power had to come from somewhere. The station's main reactor fed everything, including the isolated targeting system, which meant there was a connection somewhere. He pulled up a schematic on his handheld terminal. The station's design was elegant, everything integrated, everything efficient, everything. Wait, Marcus zoomed in on the coolant system. The reactor needed cooling, or it would overheat. The coolant ran through the entire station, including past the isolated computer cores. If he could not cut the power, maybe he could cook. The computer's Marcus ran back to the reactor control room. Coolant system had its own fail-safes digned. To prevent exactly what he was about to do, he overrode them with his access codes then. He overrode the overrides with physical bypasses then. He started venting coolant into space. The reactor temperature began to rise. Computers that controlled the orbital platforms sat next to coolant pipes that were now carrying superheated plasma instead of coolant. Marcus watched the temperature. Readings climb. The computers were hardened against heat, but nothing was hardened against this much heat. 4 minutes the first computer core went offline, then another, then 2 more. Marcus held his breath. The targeting systems were failing, but were they failing fast enough? He ran back to the firing control room. Half the mechanical switches he had broken were sparking good. The other half were still active, not good. 3 minutes. Marcus started physically destroying the remaining switches. He used his wrenches boots at one point, his bare hands. The galaxy's most sophisticated weapon system was being defeated by a human with a bad attitude and simple tools. 2 minutes. His comm system crackled to life. Marcus! Velas' voice was strained. What is happening? The platforms are still active. I am working on it. He smashed another switch. How many minutes do we have? 2. Then I need 2 minutes. Marcus threw the comm away and focused 1 switch left. 1 targeting computer still online. 1 platform still aimed at the capital. He hit it with everything he had. The switch cracked, the computer sparked. The platform's power indicator went red. Then, Dog Marcus collapsed against the wall. His hands were bleeding, his lungs burned. But every single platform was offline. He grabbed his comm, Velas. His voice was rough. We are clear. All platforms are down. I could kiss you right now. Relief flooded her voice. Do not tempt me, Your Majesty. Marcus was already limping toward the shuttle bay. I am coming back. We will need to rebuild this station from scratch, but the capital is safe. The journey back to the palace felt longer than the journey out. Marcus used the time to bandage his hands and convince himself that he had not just destroyed his hearing from all the alarms. When he landed, Velas was waiting. She ran to him the moment he stepped off the shuttle. You did it. She actually hugged him. You saved millions of people. I just broke things until they stopped working. Marcus winced as she squeezed his injured hands. Nothing fancy. It was the most impressive thing I have ever seen. She pulled back and looked at him seriously. The Ascendancy has stood for 10,000 years. Our best engineers designed those systems, and you defeated them in less than an hour with hand tools. Yeah, well, Marcus grinned despite his exhaustion. Human engineering. Terrifying. Velas smiled. Effective. They walked back into the palace together. The throne room had been Sekared Kavros, and the corrupt council members were in custody. The loyalists had established control. It was over. Velas stood before her throne and looked out at the assembled nobles and officials. Today, the Ascendancy learned something important. A voice carried through the chamber. We learned that sophistication is not the same as strength. That elegance is not the same as effectiveness. We have dismissed humanity as primitive for centuries. We were wrong. She gestured to Marcus. This human saved millions of lives. Today, he did what our best could not do. He refused to accept failure. That is strength. Velas sat on her throne. As my first act as restored Empress, I declare humanity a sovereign allied civilization. They will have full representation in the Imperial Council. Their colonies will be recognized as independent, and any who speak of them as primitive will answer to me personally. The throne room erupted in discussion. Not everyone was happy, but no one was stupid enough to argue not after watching a single human dismantle their most secure systems. Later that night, Marcus found himself in what the palace staff called a modest Workshop it was larger than his entire complex on Cavro 7, better equipped than Earth's top facilities, and apparently this is too much. He turned to find Vailith leaning in the doorway. This is what you asked for. She entered the workshop, a good workspace. I meant like a garage, maybe some decent tools. You saved my empire, Marcus. This is the least I can do. She moved to stand beside him. The council has formally voted to give you any title you want. I do not need a title. I know. Vailith smiled, which is exactly why you deserve one. How about Imperial Engineer? It has a nice ring to it. It makes me sound important. You are important. She took his bandaged hand gently. To the Empire. To me. Marcus really looked at her not as an empress or a warrior, just as Vailith. What happens now? Now I rebelled. She sighed. The Empire is damaged. Trust is broken. It will take years to fix. Need an engineer? Marcus smiled. I am pretty good at fixing broken things. I know, Vailith squeezed his hand. That is why I'm asking you to stay. Not as a subject, as a partner. The Empire needs to change Marcus. It needs to be better. And I need someone who will tell me when I am wrong. Someone who will fight for what is right, even when it is hard. Someone stubborn enough to never quit. Sounds like you are describing a human. I am describing you. They stood in comfortable silence outside the window. Throne of Sereth glittered under its some 40,000 worlds spun through space. Trillions of beings lived their lives, and a human engineer stood